When I talk about the system, I'm not talking about some shadowy cabal of old guys in suits pulling strings. No, that's too simple, and frankly, too flattering to them. What I'm talking about is something far more fundamental. It's the logic that has been embedded into pretty much everything we perceive as reality since we started building societies based on hierarchy. It doesn't need meetings, doctrines, or declarations. Its brilliance lies in its invisibility. It manifests not through enforcement, but through structure, like gravity, not command. But we don't need tinfoil hats. They don't work. Although I may sound somewhat radical, this concept of a pervasive self optimizing structure isn't new. Philosophers and spiritual traditions across millennia have tried to articulate similar phenomena. In Buddhism, it's often referred to as Maya, the illusion that obscures the true nature of reality, making us perceive a fragmented, suffering world instead of unity. Jean Baudrillard, the French philosopher, spoke of simulacra and simulation, where hyperreal copies replace reality and the map becomes more real than the territory. We live in a world of copies without originals. Michel Foucault meticulously dissected how power structures operate not through overt command, but subtly through institutions like prisons, hospitals, and schools, shaping bodies and minds to conform to societal norms. And Friedrich Nietzsche, in his radical critiques of morality and Western thought, often pointed to a will of power embedded in societal values, shaping our very interpretations of existence. They, as well as many others, were all describing different parts of the same elephant. Looking at the world from the usual perspective, it seems like a chaotic mess of people, ideas, religions, ideologies, corporations, states, family traditions, and moral norms. But if you look at it as a whole, you can see that everything works as a single organism, an interconnected system that forms, reproduces, and protects itself. Nothing in this machine exists just because. Every belief, ritual, and institutional form has passed the filter of survival, not biological, but systemic. What persists is what reinforces the whole. Religions suppress individuality through fear of punishment and the concept of guilt. States govern through behavior control, fear, and resource regulation. Corporations use manipulation and programming of needs. Families transmit the cult of suppression through upbringing. Social norms instill the concept of right and wrong thinking. Each element of the system supports the others. Religions justify the power of states. States regulate education, which programs thinking from childhood. Education teaches obedience to authority and consumption of what benefits corporations. Corporations create an environment where people live in constant stress and suppress it through permitted means consumerism, antidepressants, or entertainment. Families raise children within frameworks where resistance to the system becomes impossible. The system protects itself from destruction. If someone begins to see the mechanism, they are immediately faced with a choice. Either they go insane or become an outcast. Any exposure is immediately labeled as conspiracy theory, heresy, radicalism, overthinking, or simply ignored. Official science refuses to even admit the existence of something like this because it too is built into the system. Dissent isn't silenced, it's absorbed, reframed, monetized, or pathologized. The system doesn't fight anomalies directly. It classifies them, gives them a diagnosis, or converts them into aesthetics. What is this if not a single organism? It isn't controlled by any specific person or group. It self organizes. It has a unified principle of operation: maintain control, rewrite the personality to fit the required parameters, exclude those who don't conform to the system. The system reproduces itself just like the Cordyceps fungus in the body of an ant. The infected consciousness becomes a tool for infecting others. This creepy biological parallel helps us visualize its insidious nature. Essentially, we're talking about a parasitic program embedded in consciousness through culture, society, and upbringing. And cordyceps is simply a short and simultaneously very capacious word that immediately reflects all its properties. It's a little fungus that literally captures the consciousness of insects, turning them into zombies. It works like this: cordyceps spores land on hosts, an ant or any other insect, grow inside, and begin to release chemicals that alter its behavior. The insect loses control of itself. It climbs to the highest point where it can be most effective for spreading spores, latches onto the surface, and dies. And the fungus continues to grow, breaking through its shell and releases new spores to infect the next victims. The ant doesn't even understand what happened. Everything seems logical to him. Here he goes, here he performs his task. Except it's not his task. He no longer makes decisions. All he does is obey the commands of the fungus. The ant never rebels because there is no voice left to question. That's the perfect infection, one that doesn't feel alien. Cordyceps doesn't just use the host's body, it completely replaces its will. It controls its muscles, its neural signals, its desires. The ant becomes a vessel, a means of transportation, a puppet, not even realizing that it has long been gone. And this is exactly how the system behaves. It doesn't just surround you, it replaces your internal logic. It makes you climb some metaphorical branch and call it ambition. It whispers into your identity and pretends it's your voice. Think of it like this: your brain is incredible hardware, not just neurons, but also astrocytes, the overlooked support cells that coordinate, regulate, and even influence synaptic activity. Billions of signals firing, modulating, shaping consciousness. But what runs on that hardware? What's the software? What's the paradigm that governs the neurons and is supported, coordinated, and fine tuned by the astrocytes? That's where the system comes in. It's the code that teaches you duality: good, bad, right, wrong, success, failure, happy, sad, clean, dirty, us, them. Before this code was fully installed, the world was just the world. Everything just was. But once the system kicked in, everything had to be categorized, judged, placed in a position. And suddenly you needed a manual for existence. And that manual is written by the system for the system. It's delivered through everything: education, religion, social media, your family dynamics, the language you speak, the laws you obey or don't. It programs what normal means. It tells you what happiness looks like, what a good life entails, what you should strive for, and what you should fear. It's relentless. It's everywhere. So, this system, this pervasive code, operates exactly like a giant decentralized neural network. There is no single brain at the center, no single programmer dictating every move. Instead, it's a vast interconnected web of societal norms, institutions, beliefs, and behaviors. each acting like a node. Each interaction, each media message, each law passed, each lesson taught in school, each comment on social media, it's like a data point, a signal reinforcing certain pathways, certain weights within this colossal network. It learns, it adapts, it self optimizes for its core functions: stability, predictability, and control. Just like a neural network processes inputs and adjusts its internal connections to produce desired outputs, the system processes human consciousness, human behavior, human suffering, and constantly refines its mechanism to keep us within its parameters. It might sound like science fiction or even crazy, but from a systems theory perspective, it's incredibly logical and ordered. It explains why it feels so intelligent, so pervasive, yet has no discernible head. Because it doesn't need one. We, the individual nodes, are constantly feeding and refining it. Your resistance, if not understood at the structural level, becomes part of its next iteration. That's how it evolves, by preemptively assimilating the logic of escape. And this brings us to a crucial point about what you perceive as personal problems. You think your trauma is uniquely yours, deeply personal, a singular wound. But if you look closely, you'll see that the vast majority of personal traumas are remarkably similar. They lead to similar consequences. Why do toxic parents repeat the same phrases? Why do manipulators use identical tricks? Why do so many toxic relationships feel like carbon copies of each other? Even the haters on YouTube write comments that represent the same manipulation templates. These patterns, these templates, are not random. They are not unique to your dysfunctional family or bad luck. They are the system's subroutines, its pre programmed responses, its established pathways. If it weren't for this underlying system, such universalities simply wouldn't exist, because a true, authentic individual is unique and shouldn't operate by these predictable templates. These templates are part of the system's code, shaping our interactions and our suffering. And this is why most liberation narratives fail. They name the actors, not the structure. They blame individuals, not the equation. But equations don't care whether you believe in them, they just run. This isn't about individual people being evil. It's about an ancient logic that embedded itself so deeply it no longer looks like a choice. It processes human consciousness the way a factory processes raw material, shaping it to fit. What does it seek? A compliance pattern, a self correcting machine, minds that never threaten to rewrite the code. And what happens if you do? If you diverge from the expected pattern? Well, then the system activates its defense mechanisms. It doesn't tolerate anomalies that threaten its coherence. It will try to shut you down. It uses shame to make you doubt yourself, to make you feel wrong or guilty for not conforming. It deploys irony and mockery to belittle and dismiss rebels, making their insights seem foolish or unworthy of serious consideration. It discredits those who try to expose its workings, labeling them as paranoid, crazy, conspiracy theorists, or simply negative. And perhaps most insidiously, it psychiatrizes anomalies. If you don't fit into its prescribed box of normal, you must be sick, disordered, in need of therapy, or even medication. It turns your very authenticity into a diagnosis. It's why you feel that constant internal chatter, that never ending analysis. It's the system's monologue, running its diagnostics, making sure you're still within parameters. It's why you pursue certain goals that might not be truly yours. It's why you feel trauma, because your authentic self is constantly clashing with a reality that's been manufactured for you. They call it human nature, never pausing to ask who defined the nature and to what end. But if this really were our nature, if the system mirrored something authentic, it wouldn't produce such massive chronic suffering, especially not in those who think, question, observe. Nature doesn't generate existential torment on this scale. It doesn't design absurdity. It doesn't need therapy. When the most sensitive, perceptive minds are the ones most crushed by the structure, that's not proof of its truth. It's proof of its infection. It's so embedded, so fundamental that most people don't even see it. They think it's just how things are. They never question the framework itself. It's like a fish trying to understand water. It's all around them, so pervasive it becomes invisible. What I'm trying to do here is to point out this water, show the code. I'm not talking about blame or finding some evil architect. It's all about seeing the mechanism, because once you see the mechanism, once you understand the logic behind the curtain, you will no longer have to obey the naked emperor.